Firstly, I'm quite looking forward to a year where nothing happens. A boring, straightforward year would be really nice. I haven't had one of those since I've been running the business. But I think what these challenges have taught me is
This is the We Built This Business podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Osullivan. This is the podcast for UK business owners to share their journey, their knowledge, their sacrifices, and their successes. This podcast is sponsored by Team Building Experiences. If you're planning a team building event, away day, or corporate event, then check out team-building-experiences.co.uk and state podcast 15 in the comments to receive 15% off your proposal. Hello and welcome back to the We Built This Business podcast. Today, I'm pleased to have Daniel Bianchini on the podcast talking about Common Ground, who are digital marketing experts. They deliver measurable business growth through data-driven SEO, PPC, and paid social media campaigns. Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Dan. Thanks very much for having me.
No worries, Daniel. Really looking forward to this conversation. So, Daniel, can you start by just telling our listeners a little bit more about what Common Ground does?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you sort of indicated, we're a digital marketing agency in the UK. We are a remote agency, and we focus on search marketing, so SEO, paid search, paid social, and content marketing, as you sort of indicated. We work with a variety of businesses, from B2B to SaaS to real estate and education are the core areas of where we do our best work. And we've been going since 2018 and growing consistently in what is a turbulent market at the moment.
Yeah, certainly challenging out there at the moment. Now, one of the areas I wanted to focus on just a little bit more is the business growth through data. So how do you effectively implement that with your campaigns?
Yeah, so it all starts with analytics, essentially. So whenever we're working with clients, the first things that we want to understand is how you are performing currently or previously. There's no point us going in and developing strategies purely based on what we think the market is and what we think we can be achieving. We need to understand what you've done in the past. So that reflects things like Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, all of these different analytic programs that we would look into to understand where you're not performing very well, where you are performing well, where you're sort of stabilizing and where you could be improving. We then take third-party data alongside that because obviously we need to understand where the opportunity is. So competitors, using tools, using your Google Search Console, all this different third-party data that we have to. I mean, we have a vast array of tools to use. We then bring that together and we sort of go, okay, what's our forecast? What's our opportunity? If you were to do everything and a bit of fair wind, because obviously we're working in Google's playground in most cases when it comes to search, and they have the ability to change their algorithms at any time. This is what we feel is achievable if you were able to go forward and progress.
Brilliant. So are you able to, with your kind of analytical software and analytical mind, effectively map out how, if a business spends X amount, they can grow at this level, and if they spend this amount, they can grow at this level? Is it that detailed?
It can be, and they are with customers' forecasts. Obviously, they're never guaranteed. You can't guarantee anything in this in our industry, purely because a lot of the variables they're uncontrollable. We're not in control, as I said, about what Google does with their algorithm. Effectively, we don't know what the algorithm is. We have like insights into that over years and years of being able to do things, and the community is very talkative. But the variables are those that we just can't control. So if we put in the estimated improvement in terms of visibility, let's say we're going to take your main keyword from X to Y, what does that mean in terms of expected increase in traffic? Now, if we were to achieve that, and we overlaid that with conversion rates, average order values, then lead to sale numbers, we can then start to say that if we went from A to B and you kept all of this the same, you could expect this in terms of a return. Obviously, once we get you from A to B, we want you to be improving your average order value, improving your conversion rate so that number at the end increases. But that's the sort of work that we do at the front.
Fantastic. Yeah, my colleague Sam Green, she has had a proposal from Common Ground, and it was one of the best proposals that we've received regarding actual growth plans and what an output of cash essentially would potentially bring into the business. And it is something that, yeah, is a bit more of an eye opener from a business owner point of view, because you can start looking at the ROI, which is the key thing that everybody is always focused on, essentially. Now, Daniel, if we go back to what actually inspired you to start your own business?
It's a difficult one to say because, being honest, I never wanted to run my own business. It's one of those things that I'd never thought that would be me. I was really happy with where I was at the time. But then over a period of time, about 12 months, things started to change within the business that I was in previously. And I just had a newborn, 3 months old, and it got to the point where I was just unhappy and felt like, if I'm going to do this and start out on my own or try it on my own, now was the only opportunity that I had before my little one sort of grew up and there's more dependencies on me and things like that. So I spoke to my wife and I just took the plunge. Nothing to go to, no clients at that time, and just felt, let's give it a go. The worst that could happen was I would either supplement my work by going to Tesco's, which I've worked in previously when I was going through university, or I'd go and find a full-time role. So I took the plunge, and over the years, it's led me to this point.
Love that. So I guess it wasn't one thing. It was more like, now is the time. You've got a young family, and they always say that it's incredibly hard to actually start a business when you have a young family, because for the first time in your life, you're actually responsible for someone else as well as yourself. And to make that call at that time must have taken some real courage.
It does, but I think it also gives you that extra motivation to do it, because I'm doing it now because I know that if I was a fail or something like that, whilst there's learnings to be had from those, I would have to go back into the job market, which then meant I might not be able to spend as much time with my daughter throughout her early years. And I think that's incredibly important, is to spend time with your family. And that's what those first couple of years allowed me to do, was spend more time with them and her. And it's super important I did that. It is courageous, I think, but it's also a calculated risk. I think you need to play all of that through before you just jump in and go. There's lots of things online where you see the nice positive sides of running your own business, and not many people tell you of the other side of running a business, which is the emotional, the roller coaster, the stress that comes with it as well.
Yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail a bit later on. So did you start out as just yourself?
Yep. So when I first started, it was just me. I freelanced. I worked with some agencies. I managed to generate some direct clients as well, which I think is really important when you're freelancing, not just to rely on agencies, but to have some direct clients. From there, I was lucky, I guess, but before I left, I was working with a well-known search marketing agency. I was able to speak at conferences. Before I left, I spoke in a conference in Vegas. I've spoken at conferences locally in the UK as well. I used to blog quite a lot, so I did have a bit of a social following as well back then. It's different now, obviously, because I'm in a different space, but that sort of helped me when I went freelance to pick up some clients. And then as my freelance operation grew, I've started to realize pretty quickly that actually I'm doing more work freelancing than I was working for somebody else. And I struggled to say no to opportunities, which meant that instead of working 4 days or 3 days or whatever number of days I wanted to work, I was ended up working 5 days, 6 days over my weekends, taking stuff away with me. So it led me to build out a network of freelancers and people that I could work with to distribute some of the work on my behalf.
Brilliant. So at what point did it get to when you thought, now's the time to take on my first employee?
Wow. So I think much like I didn't want to have run a business, I really struggled with having my first employee because essentially, not only when I'm a freelancer, I was responsible for myself, but also my young family. I'm now responsible for somebody else and potentially their family, their homes, their mortgages, and their bills. So I struggled with that approach, which is why I went down like the freelance sort of supporting network because they were working with me and others. So I didn't feel completely under the cosh, if you like, from there. When we came together with create common ground and came together with Matt, Matt already had two members of the team, so it became a bit easier for me to sort of go, okay, this is how it works. Get a bit more mentally strong enough to understand that okay, we need to pay these bills. This goes out to the staff very early on. I'll be honest, it's taken me years to actually become comfortable with it. And I would say it's only recently that I'm more comfortable with the fact that we have staff and a team. I mean, we're 10 plus here at Common Ground now. And even now I struggle. I struggled up until recently to understand that, okay, this is how we work. This is how the business is going to be running.
And what would you say is you said you struggled until recently. What has happened recently that has kind of been able to enable you to cope with that kind of mental pressure, essentially?
I think there's lots of mental pressures that we run from a business point of view, and there's lots of different things. I think for me, it was just being in a much better place personally. That was one thing, and making sure that that was all resolved. And I'm sure we can go into this in a bit more detail later. But I think it's just that switch. It's that once you know you've been established for so long, you sort of have to change that mentality of going, okay, it's not like a flight or fight risk. You now that you are constantly generating X amount of revenue on a monthly basis, I'm making X amount of percent because we work on the profit first model. So we know that's what our base is. So we're very comfortable with the salary base that we have. And we have that flex and that growth room in there as well.
Brilliant. I think that's one of the key things that the mental side, obviously overcoming, if you've got a bit of anxiety or anything like that to do with one area, it is always a challenge to try and overcome that, especially as a business owner when everyone's looking at you and you should know all the answers. You mentioned about profit first. Now, for those listeners that don't know what profit first is, it's a book by, I don't know if you remember the name, is it Mike Michalowicz? I'm just trying to say.
Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one.
I can never say it right. So
I don't think anyone can. Could you give us a breakdown of how you've implemented that in your business and what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was given this book when I started freelancing by a good friend of mine, Marcus Taylor. And he said, whatever you do, read this book and then make your decision on which way you want to go down from an accounting point of view. So I read it back to front. I read it pretty quickly. It's not great with business books because I find them quite dry. But when you get into one that's really interesting and written in a way that's more, I'd say normal, and then I really get through them. And what I found was with this book, the aim is to ensure that you have your numbers set up so that you're always taking money out, either personally or into your profit accounts. Therefore, you're building up your vaults and all of that type of stuff. The book tends to go into 7 different accounts that they want you to set up and to manage. So there is a lot of accounts and a lot of financial sort of education that you would need to go through to understand it. But you can change that to whatever suits you. Now we've got 5 accounts, I think it is, plus some savings accounts that we use currently purely because of where we are with interest rates and things like that. But the key areas are an operations account. So basically this houses anything for your overheads on a monthly basis. You've got your vault, essentially that's meant to be to house overheads for a period of time. Like some businesses like to have 3 months of overheads. Some people like to have 6 and like to have 12. We're in the midst of 3 to 6, and we're constantly building that on a regular basis, purely so that if anything happens, the pandemic, for example, there are overheads there that can be utilized to support you if necessary. You then obviously have your tax accounts, the VAT and your corporation tax, and move them out straight away. And then you have your profit account, or I think he calls it a check-in account, which is essentially for you as business owners. And then every month, what we do is we have an agreed split. So we have our VAT, which is currently at 20%, our corporation tax, which is currently at 25%, I think it is. And then we have our splits between the profit and things like that. We then take our split every month straight away from X account into our profit account, then obviously everything into our VAT and corporation tax. Those are the 3 first things that we do. And then everything else is left to pay overheads, bills, etc., etc. The key to this is making sure that you are checking in on your costs every single month. I don't know about you, Dan, but for us, is like the team might add in an extra cost. That's one-off. They only need it once, but it's on a monthly subscription. So then 2 months down the line, we're paying for something that we don't need. So it's checking in on a monthly basis, reviewing all your costs, keeping it lean and streamlined where you don't need it, getting the best deal as well where possible.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best books you can be recommended to read, I think, at the beginning, because understanding or just looking after your finances is everything. You know, if you've got a business, it could be the best business in the world, but if it doesn't make any money, then you can never do what you want to do with it, you know, essentially. We implemented a little bit of profit first. We didn't go fully as we should with, 7 different accounts essentially, but we budget at the start of the year, and we effectively budget how much profit we're looking to make in the business as a percentage, and then we make sure that all of our costs fit into that budget so that we make that profit at the end of the year. And it has really revolutionized what we did in-house as well, because we were for the first 5 or 6 years one of those businesses that literally took their accounts to their accountant at the end of the year and then was like, oh, we haven't made as much money as we thought, but we've been working really hard, so once we started producing management accounts, and once we actually started producing budgets at the start of the year, and actually factor in that profit element, it's enabled us to grow substantially over the last 5 to 6 years. So big recommendation, I would say, for anyone looking to start up. Now, we alluded on a few challenges that have happened in the economy over the last couple of years. Starting obviously with, we've got the Brexit vote. We then went on to, leaving the EU. We had the COVID pandemic. How has Common Ground changed since the pandemic happened?
Quite a bit. So firstly, I'm quite looking forward to a year where nothing happens. A boring, straightforward year would be really nice. I haven't had one of those since I've been running the business. But I think what these challenges have taught me is, if we can survive through what we have over our first 5 to 6 years, and I feel that we can survive through whatever else can be thrown at us. We came in as a office-based business in 2018. We was here in Oxford, and we moved to a new location, and we was in a position of actually moving to a bit more of a permanent location when the pandemic came in. And that meant that everyone went remote across the country. Every business obviously went to remote. Now, we took that as an opportunity to stay remote. It worked for us. We had to pivot. We had to make some difficult decisions and changes, but it's worked for us. And now, instead of having a 20-mile radius to recruit in, we have a national radius that we can recruit in. And if we wanted to, we can go into Europe as well, where some of our support staff are based.
Brilliant. I mean, what the foresight you had to lose the office at the same time as the pandemic kicked in is one that you're right about in years to come, I'm sure. So I don't know if you want to tell people a little bit more about that story, about how you were just in between when you were accepting a new office.
Yeah, so we got to the end of 2019. I can't remember the years now. Whichever the year was, we come to the end of that, and we've made a decision that we're going to be moving on from our current location. So we come back from Christmas and handed our notice in on the first working day in January, and then we had a 3-month notice period. And as we was talking, I was looking around, and we identified a location that we was going to go to, and was in the process of legals and exchanging contracts and things like that. Obviously, the COVID thing was happening, obviously firstly in China and then making its way across the globe. And then when it started to get to Europe, I really started to pay a bit more attention to it, specifically when it was in Italy. I have family there, so I could get a bit more insight into some of the things that was happening. And we just held back a bit on the office. We sort of sat on our haunches a little bit and goes, let's just see what's going to happen. And then as soon as lockdown started happening in different countries, we felt that was going to happen for us here in the UK. So we started to make some suggestions as to what that might look like for us as a business. Now, we were lucky with the fact that our notice period ended at the end of March, and our lockdown went in at 17th of March. So we were lucky, many people weren't, but it has provided a lot of opportunities for us in terms of progressing.
So we're a completely remote team now. How do you make sure that you're happy with your employees? Because we're now fully office based again, and we can see everyone every day, and I guess it's a different business model now to what it was in 2020. But how do you look after your employees and make sure that they've got everything they need and they're working at the level that you expect them to be?
Yeah, I think that the first and foremost is the trust element. I think you have to trust your team, and there has to be a building up of that trust over a period of time. And it's a two-way street. It's not necessarily just from us as business owners to the team, but from the team back to us as the business owners. There are key things that we put in place. So every day we have the opportunity to get together as a team in a scrum. It's optional, because if we did it every single day, then some people might not want to be there. They want to get on with some of the work and activity. So optional every day except Friday. And then we all get together on a Friday in Scrum. So this morning, for example, we had our weekly quiz. And we set up like a little bit of a leaderboard, and we have some fun and things like that. So that keeps everybody engaged. We also make sure that we're meeting up regularly. So every quarter, without fail, we would then meet up in the center of the country. So we go to Birmingham, and we would do a social day. So last time we were doing golf and bowling. Then that one in the summer is going to be a 2-day event where we're going to do some like bake-off stuff and stay overnight and have some food and drinks and really have that social interaction. So you do get that face-to-face time as well. But we're constantly talking. We have Slack, we have video calls. It's not like we say hello at 9 a.m. and goodbye at 5. It's constant communication.
Yeah, I think it's really important you've identified about the regularly still meeting up, so that you've got that face-to-face connection, and that there's not complete distance from you and the team. I mean, I see our team every single day, and I think it's one of those that we are looking more at the remote angle again. We've kind of gone in both ways. We went fully remote obviously when we had to, and then we've gone all fully back into the office, and now we're kind of finding a bit of a hybrid approach again. So it swings in roundabouts, but I guess it's like everything. It just depends on what your business needs and the type of people you've also got in the business. When you have juniors that need to learn off others, sometimes it's easier if they're around others. But if you've got more experienced staff, I think they, working from a distance can be as satisfactory for them as being in the office.
Yeah, I think there are some challenges to it. So one challenge is with new starters, for example, is trying to get them onboarded and things like that. So one of the things that we've implemented recently is, like, if we are to have a new starter, we will move our quarterly social, or we'll add in an extra get together earlier in the phase, because that way they get a bit more face-to-face time with us really early. They get to know us, and you can break down that barrier, which is currently the screen. So that's something that we want to look at. Also, with being remote, is that you have the ability to hire different skill sets. Now, if it was more of a junior role and they need a bit more training, then the team have the ability to meet up regularly. It's not like they can't. We say, look, if you want to go and meet and you can do some sessions actually every week or something like that, that we can do that. It's about adapting to the right way of working at the right time. One thing that we learn as well is not everybody likes to do remote working, despite them wanting to do remote work. It doesn't suit everybody. Now, we put a big emphasis on understanding and trying to almost deter people from taking a remote role if they don't think it's right for them. And I've had a number of people where I've been on the interview and I've said, have you ever done remote working before? And if they say no, apart from no, except for COVID, and it's like, well, it's completely different there because everyone had to do it at that time, whereas now it's an option. So I really dig into that and say, these are the positives. Here are some of the negatives that will come with it. Do you have setup? Do you have room? Do you have the right support structures around you? Do you have people to talk to throughout the day that are maybe in the house or things like that? There's lots of things that you need to consider when you go in remote.
Yeah, no, excellent. And obviously different people's circumstances as well. Like you say, some people thrive on being around others and some people are more than happy to not be around others for most of the day and just communicate electronically. Now, having a remote team, I imagine you must have a very good documentation, like process system. How have you implemented that so that your team can all work independently?
Yeah, so this is where COVID was an advantage for us because we took the time. During COVID, what we had was a bit of a shake-up over the first 2 or 3 months of it, and then there's a stabilization, and then there was growth. So during that shake-up, everyone was hands to the pump, making sure that the business was going to be okay and not fall down. When it started to stabilize, we had a bit more time. So Matt and I spent a lot of our time building out processes and implementing them because we were back in doing some of the work at that stage. So we managed to, during COVID, just process most stuff, actually build out the frameworks, get the team to back on board to utilize those frameworks, and then utilize the consistency, which would then enable us to deliver the results. So one of the things that you would have seen from the, or Sam would have seen from the proposal is that we had a framework in terms of how we approached our organic search campaigns or our paid search campaigns. And whilst those frameworks are flexible to the team, because there will be rabbit holes that you want to go down, it does allow a consistent approach to the way that we deliver our SEO and PPC campaigns.
Perfect. Well, I mean, they say documentation is the way to grow a business, essentially, because if you look at McDonald's, how regimented, and no matter which McDonald's you go into, that they're all producing the same quality, no matter which country you're in. And it's all down to the fact that everything is documented, regimented, and can be replicated again and again. And that's the way to grow a business. So you're now at 10 employees, is that correct?
Yeah, so we have a 10 plus internal employees, and then we have a freelance network that we utilize on a regular basis. So if you took everybody that we work with, we're about 16 people.
Okay. And what would you say your plans are for growth? Are you planning to, keep the agency or, like almost like a boutique level, or are you looking to now scale and take things to the next level?
Yeah, we are looking to grow. There's a few options for us to grow in terms of how we want to get to the next stage. We're undecided on whether it's an exit, whether it's a sit back and allow the team to run the business or to continue. I think that's a work in progress, but we are working with external consultants and business coaches on saying, okay, this is where we are currently. How do we get to X? And what does that look like? And how can we say, if we wanted to exit, let's say, what do we need to get to? What do we need to achieve? how much of us in the business do we need to be? How much of us on the business? I mean, how much of us out of the business, even like letting somebody else run it, needs to happen to get to that next level.
How important has a business coach been to you in your business development?
We've had several. So we've had 3 different business coaches, and I think for me, they can be hit and miss. But I think the key thing is to take the learnings, and then once those learnings start to plateau, because I think they do, because I mean, each business coach will get you to a certain level, and you learn a certain number of things before actually you start to repeat a lot of the stuff, or you're unable to implement certain things. So at the start of our business, we had a really great coach who really pushed us on the financial side of things. And whilst we brought in the profit first model and we sort of educated him around that, getting through the financials, making sure we were coherent and of cash flow and all that sort of stuff was really important. Then the next stage was also almost about how do we get the process in place and how do we get that all working and things. And then the one that we currently have is, okay, what do we need to do to scale and get to the next stage? And I think there's always a shelf life on coaches at different stages. And you do need to go away and implement some of the stuff that you have. But it's just making sure that you choose the right one, ideally with industry knowledge, because some coaches can be very generic in terms of like their knowledge of a business. Like I have a knowledge of business now, but that doesn't necessarily mean I could go and speak to somebody in your type of business and say, this is how you should do it. I think you just need to have industry knowledge.
No, it's a very good point. And with coaches, I guess it can be compared to sometimes to football teams, I guess, is in like a coach we brought in and they'll bring, a team up to a certain level, and then they need a different coach to come in to try and push them further, because once they've tried and tested their ideas and they're at that speciality or skill set, then often you need someone new with fresh ideas that's been there and almost grown bigger businesses to kind of show what needs to be done to get to that level. Now, mentorship, have you ever looked at that angle at all?
I had a mentor when I was freelancing very, very early on, but I haven't done since. I do have a number of people that I talk to pretty much weekly that I would class as mentors, but we're friends. One of the ones closest to me is Kevin Gibbons, and we basically talk weekly, and we would go on like we was at Farmer Reservoir recently. We always do like a few laps of the farmer. We're just talking about business generally and having a chat. So he's someone that I talk to a lot about business, and he's in the same sector as me as well.
Brilliant. Yeah. So having almost a confidant, someone that knows the industry that you can talk to about the challenges that you're currently going through, because often as business owners, it's very lonely. You don't have anyone that has the comparable issues that you've currently got going on. So if you've got a colleague, or well, not necessarily a colleague, but a mentor or someone that's a friend that you can confide in, that makes a big difference, I imagine.
For me, obviously, I have my business partner in terms of Matt as well, that we always talk a lot about the business and stuff. But from our point of view, we're always obviously insulated. We're inside the business and we're talking about the inside stuff. Whereas I like to talk to like Kevin about, okay, what's the wider, the bigger picture, that any insights I can take in, I can bring into conversations that Matt and I have. As you sort of said, like when you are 1 or 2 people, it's not like you can talk to your partner and they understand the pressures. They sort of want to understand it. But my partner, she doesn't own a business. She works for a big business, and it's completely different in terms of how she sees it versus how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife is in the government essentially, so she finishes at 4:00 or 4:30, and she sometimes cannot understand why I'm still working at 9:00 or 9:30. And I have to explain that unfortunately I've got no one else that needs to be able to do this. It's only me that can do it. So it does happen, that's for sure. We touched on it earlier, overcoming the mental pressures of running a successful business. Do you have any advice for people out there of how you essentially cope with some of the mental pressures of running a business?
Yeah, so for me, there's a few things that I've done that's helped me. Everybody's obviously different, and different things will help different people. So, um, at one point, I was going to see a therapist just to have a chat about business, but also personal stuff and things like that. And that was really useful. That was 6 months to really just basically open the doors in terms of like I can talk to people about this sort of stuff, and nobody's gonna look at it differently. So that was the first thing. The second thing was going and doing exercise. So when I was freelancing, I was doing PT once a week. Exercise for me is a stress reliever, whether that is personal training, which I do a couple of times a week, or it's on a spin bike, which I do 3 times a week now. It allows me to come back fresh afterwards. I also do them at lunchtime because I used to do it in the evenings. And what I started to feel like is I've done a long day at work, and then I have to make myself go to the gym. And then by the time I've done all of that, it's like 9 o'clock. And then I'm home and it's like, bed, rinse and repeat. So what I do now is I try and get as much of them. So 4 out of my 5 sessions are all at lunchtime throughout the week. Which means I essentially, when I finish work, unless I have to start again later on, because as you said, sometimes you need to burn the midnight oil and get some stuff done. I finished, I could spend some time with my family, and I don't have to rush out to the gym. So that was the second big thing. I think another thing was for me, as I indicated earlier, is like the mental pressures of being responsible for other people and being responsible for paying them. I had to ensure that I was set up financially, and that if whatever happened, the worst case happened, I was okay in terms of like, okay, I'm covered for a little bit of time in case I need to go and find a job or whatever that is. I think that was sort of like a mental reliever to say the pressure's off if everything goes really badly for whatever particular reason. I just needed to take that pressure off me. And that was really important as well.
Really, really good advice. I say the exercise part as well, I think is so easy to just not make time for yourself. You have so much going on all the time that you could always be working, couldn't you? It's 24/7, it never stops. Going back to the agency business, agencies are going through a little bit more of a challenging time at the moment, with a challenging economy. How are you navigating those times?
It is challenging. You're absolutely right in terms of um, the lead flow is slower than it usually is, and when you are working through proposals, then they may take a little bit longer to move through the process, because businesses are affected obviously by the economy, and our economy is affected by the US economy, and so forth and so on. So with several big events that have happened over the past 5 years, it's not really got to a point where it's a thriving economy, although we'd hope maybe later in the year with the elections and the US elections and things that might have a positive impact on that. But the thing that we're focusing on is making sure that firstly, the current and existing clients are being serviced as well as they possibly can be, and progressing and getting the results that we should be, to ensure that there's consistency in growth there. We're looking at marketing. I mean, for us, we say this to our own clients, but during this time, we shouldn't be turning marketing off. We need to be visible. We need to be doing things that are going to keep our brand in front of potential prospects during a time where they may not be spending, but if they can consume your content, whether it's a podcast like this, whether it's a blog post, whether it's a webinar, whatever it may be, you may be front of mind when it comes to a decision or building out a list in terms of marketing agencies. So that's a lot of work that we're doing in the background. And also with the processes that we talked about earlier in the session, was they can't stay still. We need to constantly evolve. We need to constantly be changing them and improving them. So what we had in 2020 is not going to be the same as what it is now, and obviously what it's going to be in the future. So we have to continuously evolve those and keep moving that forward.
Brilliant. I say the agency now has reached, is it a seven-figure turnover? Is that correct?
Yeah, we're a 7-figure agency. That's correct.
which is a fantastic achievement for an agency. How have you got there? What is the thing that differentiates yourself from so many other agencies?
I think it's difficult to say that we're different. If you look at any agency in our space, a lot of them offer the similar thing. What I think I'd like to think that we focus on a lot more, and hopefully it came across in the proposal that Sam would have seen, is we focus on the commercials a lot more. So it's all well and good ranking for a particular keyword or actually being visible for these particular elements, but how does that then impact top line first and then bottom line at the end of the day? Because that's where businesses grow. So we like to focus on, okay, what are the metrics, what are the numbers that we can achieve, like impact, but realistically impact, not have this over optimistic objective that we're going to support you by turning, let's just say, we're going to turn a £1 million business to a £2 million business in 12 months. That's almost pie in the sky. It's a bit over optimistic, and it's just trying to win the business. What we're trying to do is actually say, here's your market. This is what we think is the objective based on the budget that you have available currently. So this is where we feel that we can achieve you. However, here is what the objective or the opportunity is if you had an unlimited budget and what we could do over periods of time. So I like to feel that we're focused a lot more on business objectives rather than vanity metrics. And that's done really well for us.
Fantastic. I say you've got a very bright future ahead. Your business sounds that it's on a very good path. With all the proceduralization, the infrastructure, the good quality staff, and also the data driven, I think is the key element as well of any kind of business model. Now, what advice would you give to someone trying to start a business in 2024?
I think if I was reflecting on me back when I started the business, I think I was quite naive to it. I was very much understanding of this is going to be easy, that I can go away and do my freelance and I can earn X amount of money and I'll be happy. The reality is it's very difficult. It's hard. You need to think about your emotions. I'm an emotional guy, and sometimes that comes out, and that's why you need to control that. And that's something I've been learning on. I think you need to be aware of the current climate and the markets, and whether you're in a position to be able to actually push and go for it, because a lot of businesses are unfortunately failing, and a lot of businesses are unfortunately making redundancies. So it's tough out there right now. For new businesses specifically, and for smaller businesses like ourselves and others. It's you got to think about it, bigger picture, and don't just think about it for your short term. It's like, what can I do in 3, 4, 5 years? Is it realistic? And is there an opportunity for me to go and target that? If there is, and you're in a comfortable position, I would say have some sort of financial backstop or a vault, like I like to call it, to fall back on just in case things don't work out and you either don't get any business for 2 or 3 months. You still need to be able to pay your bills and things like that. So those are the sort of things I would reflect on if I was to do this again.
Really good advice. And like you said, that's how you started as well. You did have some funding in the background that you knew that you could fall back on. So even though you were taking a risk, because running a business is a risk, isn't it? Most businesses don't make 10 years, 95% don't. So it is a challenge and something that you have to commit to. You gave us a great recommendation earlier for the Profit First book. Have you got any other podcasts or books that you listen to that you could recommend to our listeners?
I tend to read books more than listen to podcasts, unless I'm trying to learn Italian, for example. So that's not going to be useful to any of your listeners. But some of the books that I read that I found really useful are, so Mike Markovich, he has a series of books. So you've got the Profit First, you've got the Pumpkin Plan, you've got Clockwork, which are 3 really good ones. There is another one, I forget, it's over here in my bookshelf somewhere. I'm a really big fan of the EOS system and traction. So there's a series by Gino Wick. I really recommend that one. And if you like those two series, then you will like the E-Myth as well. It's a bit of an older based book, but it's all about, for me, processes and how you move your business forward in a way that delivers frameworks that allows you then to step out over time, obviously.
Fantastic. And we'll put those recommendations in the show notes as well so that you can go and find those later. Daniel, thanks so much for being a guest. Really enjoyed it. Can you tell everyone where they can find more information about Common Ground and also yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are Common Ground Digital, so www.commonground.digital. You can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect there. I'm happy to have conversations as well about, business in general. I quite like these conversations to talk about my experiences, any learnings, and obviously some of the activity that we've done to get here. Or if you're looking for search marketing as well, then you can contact us about that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Daniel. And that was another episode of We Built This Business. And we'll be back next week.